Good day. This is Gary Clark, the other Gary Clark, back to you with question for today. The podcast has started 6 weeks ago, and I'm continuing. Had some interesting feedback. Have had some good conversations about the questions that we ask ourselves, or we find ourselves asking when we meet people, and we find we don't all agree on everything or see things in the same way. We're all individuals. Uh, Question for today was a song that I wrote about 42 years ago and been asking questions for today. If I speak to you in silence is another question that came out of my head over the years, and it turned into a song called Beyond the Avenue. Let me play it for you because we're asking questions that help us understand each other, especially if we're coming from opposite ends of the spectrum or the thought process. Some people say left and right. Some people say right and wrong. Those are all value judgments. I'm going to avoid those value judgments because I'm about trying to encourage conversation and questions that help people understand each other before we make judgments, before we decide whether we agree or disagree. And this comes from a lot of years of practicing talking with people and having to listen very carefully and make sure I understand and before I answer the question, so I don't offend somebody accidentally or without need. So there's a song called Beyond the Avenue. It's called that, and it has a few questions all the way through it. If I speak to you with silence, will your answer be complete? Will the end of your existence be the talk about the street? If I speak to you with kindness, will the war in you see peace? In truth I bid you victory if you have eyes to see. Would the blacksmith and his hammer work on separate horses' shoes? Would the plow refuse to follow? Could the farmer pay his dues? Could indifference stand in front of what the masses have agreed? Set your wheels of time in motion, let your weary slaves go free. We are one, we are many, in the company of few, on a train bound for glory far beyond the avenue. Will my message find a mason building walls around your ears? Or will you tell me you believe and hope that I will disappear? Put a band-aid on your broken arm, relieve your pain and fear. When you see the soldiers coming, turn around. I'll still be here. We are one, we are many, in the company of few, on a train bound for glory far beyond the avenue. In the street we are pity, in the forest morning dew. In need of love we are plenty, quick to notice, plenty few. Beyond the Avenue, filled with many questions. Let's start with the first one. Question for today. If I speak to you in silence, will your answer be complete? Well, of course. Silly, I would say to myself. If someone asked me that question, I would say, of course. My answer won't be complete unless I understand what you're saying. I joke over the years. Every year, I tell people I insist on learning a new language every year. It might sound funny because it's all in English, but it's an evolving thing. And the language I pursue learning every year is young people's language. You ever thought about it that way? If you've ever raised kids, maybe you got grandkids that have been growing up, if you grew up as a kid into an adult, you all gravitated toward trying new language or discovering or shifting or morphing the language. Do you remember when, you might recall, when the word bad became good? The Bible talks about that. I think I referenced that a couple times a couple weeks ago. There will be a time where people will not put up with sound doctrine, but instead they will heap up for themselves teachers to give their itching ears what they want to be tickled with. That's a full orb translation of the original Greek. And that's from 2 Timothy chapter 4. Read those things, chapter 3 and 4. And it talks about the time where people will be lovers of self, haters of family and friends, and enemies, and make enemies of everyone they can. We see that happen, and the more years we get a chance to watch society and culture and gender or generations grow. I've seen a couple now in my time, and not even close to some of my friends who are in their 80s and 90s. But the language evolves, but it cycles itself around. It's almost a reciprocal thing. That almost 2,000-year-old writing from the Apostle Paul to the young pastor Timothy that he was training up said in times to come, in these last days, men will become lovers of selves and haters of family and friends, and they will heap up for themselves teachers to give their itching ears what they desire to be tickled with. And we see that in our generation, the last couple of generations, where academia has been elevated to such a high level of importance, where we had, I remember one of our children went to college, the youngest one went to college, and came back 2 weeks later and asked her mom, says, "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" And her mom said, "What didn't I tell you?" She says, "Why didn't you tell me we're running out of drinkable water and we're going to be out in a short time if we don't make all these changes to the earth?" And her mom said, "How long have you known me?" She said, "All my life." She says, "Do you think I would keep something that drastic a secret?" She says, "Well," she said, "Where'd you hear that?" "Well, my professor said this." And then we looked up, we researched a whole bunch of things. And she said, and sure enough, there's sources out there, scientists that say we're going to be out of usable drinking water in a few years. And she said, "What's the source?" And she said, "Google." And her mom said, "That's not primary source information. We taught you how to research things. We taught you how to go research and discover who's got credible information, but go back to the basics. Go back to the basics, daughter. Do you think I would keep a secret like that from you? I love you. If I speak to you in silence, will your answer be complete? Will the end of your existence be the talk about the street? We have no shortage of mania and hysteria about the end of this world, the end of our existence, whether you call it global warming, climate change, global cooling, whether you've watched the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, if you've had a privilege of living long enough to see those changes and shifts. I was caught by the question, I'll just pick one of those, and there's 100 to work with that people are batting back and forth against each other. without first asking each other what they believe and why they believe what they believe. And I said earlier in the podcast, there's nothing out of bounds. There are questions that people are asking. They were dying to ask for understanding, and they're getting shut down and cut off from all sides of the spectrum. Yeah, I said earlier you might call it right, left, right, wrong, progressive, ultra conservative, MAGA, STAGA, BAGA. You call it what you want. I'm going to call it orange peel, okay? Orange or peel. How about that? Why don't I just make a new word, since every generation's into making new words? Orange or peel? Let's say orange is on the right and peel is on the left. How's that? We'll just make that rule for today. It'll only last a few more minutes, and then we can go back to the normal meaning of the words orange and peel. Or if we're talking about an orange peel, that would be one thing, wouldn't it? And I'm saying this on purpose because words will take us in many different directions. And the meaning we attach to those words, if we're in the next generation coming up, I've used old words and they say, Papa, you're so mean. Why am I mean? What caused you to think I'm mean? What did I say that you say is mean? Well, you said the person is ignorant. Well, ignorant is a real thing. I have been ignorant most of my life about all topics I didn't have any knowledge about until I started to learn. Then my ignorance was covered with knowledge. It was cured because I realized I did not have the information on it. I was not the expert in that situation. And then I had to listen to the people who really knew. Example I've used many times is if I started acting like I was a automotive genius or a motorhead. Now, you motorheads, you know what that means. That means you eat, breathe, and drink, and you can just be consumed by tearing engines down and rebuilding them as often as you want to, or as often as you think you might want to or have to. You might hear a sound. Oh, I better go redo those. I better ream those valves out. I better check the pistons. I better reseat the valves. I know a couple of things because I had to learn how to fix my cars because I couldn't afford to pay people to do it. So I depended on neighbors and family and friends and found the people. So I know a little bit enough to be dangerous. Okay? But if I started trying to present myself as an expert, all you motorheads would be looking at me and shaking your head and say, that guy is a fool. He does not know what he's talking about. He is so ignorant. So my grandkids say, Papa, that's so mean. Why are you so mean? I say, well, what kind of response should I make? If I'm speaking the truth and I'm simply making an observation of fact, because anybody who walks up and tries to act like an expert in something they clearly don't understand, and I do understand a little bit about, I'm going to sit and listen to them, and I'll try to offer. I'll say, well, are you talking about this or that? Are you talking about this aspect or another aspect, or what part of it are you most familiar with? And then they tell me what they know. You know, it's not uncommon for young people to want to sound like they know more than they do. We used to have a joke, you know, you need to hire somebody, hire a 16-year-old who just got their driver's license, and then put them on the toughest jobs, and they'll say, oh yeah, I know how to do that. And then you sit back and watch and make sure they don't hurt themselves and get ready to teach them when they realize, you know, they don't know. Now, is that arrogant? Is that making myself better than? No, it's a reality of life. I had that happen when I was building airplanes and putting plumbing the wheel wells of the 737s for 11 months. And this young guy, full of energy and just really nice to talk with, but he did not want to listen to anybody who knew what they were talking about because he was a Boeing baby. He was a descendant of upper management Boeing people, and he got his job that way, but he had to keep it on his own. Found out he had to keep it on his own. He had this long, red, bright, flaming hair. And I said, dude, you better tie that up and tuck it into your coveralls if you're going to work those flap transmissions, the wheel well transmissions. He looked at me and it's like, who are you? Well, I was just about 10, 15 years older than him, and I'd seen people get wrapped up in those things when they were testing the function of them. I knew his hair was a prime opportunity for him to get wrapped up and get it ripped out of his head if nobody was there to stop it or stop the actuator from happening. It was a gear screw. The landing gear on all airplanes. They got these gear screws that lower the gear and raise the gear. It's a transmission. It's a screw transmission. And he went about his job and working the job and blew me off. And so I just kept doing my plumbing, putting the tubes in the wheel well of the 737 left hand wheel well until I saw him hit that thing, and he turned around and his long hair got caught in that worm screw, that transmission screw. And all of a sudden, his eyes lit up like silver dollars. And he says, hey, stop this thing, stop this thing. And I picked up the remote control and I said, I knew how much time he had. He had quite a bit of hair to wrap up in there. But I needed to make sure he understood the seriousness of safety and that anybody who was giving him a safety hint was for his benefit, whether he thought he could learn something from old people or not. And I wasn't that old. And my lead man was sitting out there, and he was another 15 years older than me, just watching. And I had long hair, and I had mine wrapped up and tied and tucked into my coveralls because that was the safest way to work on an airplane, around machines and tools that can wrap you up and move faster than you could ever imagine. And he says, you gotta stop, you gotta stop, you gotta stop it. And I said, are you gonna listen now, or are we gonna have to ship you off to another place that's not dangerous? And I had the controller in my hand, and I didn't feel bad about it either. He needed to understand he was not the expert in the area, and he needed to understand that everybody's safety, including his, was paramount. That was the most important thing. So I stopped. I said, you're going to get a haircut because it's already wrapped in. Before I saw it, it was already wrapped too far in there. We can't get it out all. So you're going to get a haircut. Now you just hold still. And I went and grabbed my big tin shears and I snipped it off 2 inches from his head. In the back, I had a big old glob of hair. It was wound up in there. And he had a big open patch in the middle of his head. I said, you're going to get a haircut. You're going to look like an executive for however long it takes you to grow this out. But if you want to continue working in this area, you will humble yourself. You will act like your condition, and your condition is ignorance until you learn. And you apply yourself, and you can learn all these tools, all these processes within about a year to where you're proficient at them, but not an expert. I said, are you gonna start learning now? He said, yes, please, because I had stopped it, but he was stuck. I said, I'm gonna cut your hair off to get you free, and I hope you get a nice haircut to match everything this way. Oh, he was mad. The next day he came in, and the next day he walked up and he said, I'm sorry I was a jerk. I apologize. Will you forgive me? You forgive me? Man, I hadn't heard that on a factory floor for a long time. Come to find out, the kid had some values, and he had some old school training. He understood about forgiveness and apologizing and taking responsibility. And I did know his grandfather, who was an upper level manager. I knew the name. I knew where he got it too, because the guy was solid. There was 3 generations there in that company. But they were solid human beings, and they had common sense, and they had a work ethic, and they knew what ignorance was, and he sent him down to the wing join area on purpose because he looked at his grandson and he said, you're so arrogant, you need a lesson. And so we put him in the we call the armpit of the factory, the wing to body join crew, where you put the wings on the 737s in Renton, Washington, and they put the landing gear on, and then they set it on the wheels once it's all buttoned up, and then they move it down line. He knew that was the toughest place he could put him, and he would learn. And the people down there cared about safety. He thought we were mean at first because we were telling him what to do. He had a sea level change. The level at which he saw things and heard things changed in a 24-hour period of time. And he did get a dandy haircut. He looked sharp. He looked like a kid right out of high school, which he was. And it kind of helped his posture, I think. And he was a great mechanic. He was a great worker. Once he got knocked off his little pedestal he had set himself up on to hopefully prove that he was everything he needed to be. We're none of us everything we need to be. No matter how many years we've learned, how many questions we've asked, how many questions we've found the answers to, how many more questions are we going to learn how to ask? Question for today. We get to live it day by day, be it work or constant play, because it happens anyway. It happens, in my case, it happens in Christ's name. So what's your question for today? Last week I mentioned that it depends on our attitude in learning to approach what we need to learn. People have been asking me, and I'm going to pick up on this and continue, and I'm going to move into what the Bible calls the fruit of the Spirit, because we have peace and joy. And I'll just share the fruit of the Spirit with you right now. In the scriptures, in the book of Galatians, New Testament book, the Apostle Paul writes a contrasting picture of what the Spirit of God produces in us and through us, based on who God is, compared to what the spirit of the kingdom of this world is, or the evil one. You may or may not believe there's a devil. I believe he's real. I believe he was the highest angel, the covering angel at the side of God, God's most beautiful angel. But then he got arrogant and he wanted more. He wanted God's glory instead of the glory that he was created to demonstrate and live and serve God with. So he did the opposite. He rebelled, and God cast him out of heaven. He relegated him to the earthly realm. So when I refer to the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of this world, I'm referring to the kingdom that Satan, for a while, was relegated to have some control over, until Christ made a public spectacle